Hi, this is Sergeant Beast Larson. Do you know what the inmates are in prison for that are around you? I dedicate this to my buddy Frank. He's the admin in a Facebook group called the Brotherhood of Correctional and Detention Officers of Arizona. It's a great group. Look it up. Brotherhood of Correction and Detention Officers of Arizona. Frank's a great guy. We talk frequently. It gives me some good ideas. Well, he posted about 3 days ago, should correction officers know what the inmates are charged with, what they're convicted of? Now, I worked in a prison in Georgia, and down there they said, no, you shouldn't. Fair, firm, and concise. You should treat everybody equally. That way, you don't have to worry about things or any kind of prejudice or discrimination coming out. However, being a defensive tactics instructor my whole career, most of it over 20 years, I disagree with that because you need to know what you're dealing with to know how to deal with it. It's kind of like hazardous material spill in law enforcement. We carry around these little books. You look at the placard, you match the placard, what it is, how to contain it. Do you need a 1 mile radius because it's airborne and an inhalant? Or is it flammable? You just need a 500-foot perimeter. Makes a big difference. I agree with Frank, and I agree with a lot of states that you do need to know. I'll give you an example. Last night, my wife and I, we've been married over 25 years. I was a police officer when I met her, so these 25 plus years, she has known the law enforcement community family. And we're watching TV, watch Dateline. And the story was called Shannon's Story. And we're watching a young lady going to Emory College in Georgia, up by the Atlanta area. She's in college, I believe a sophomore, disappears. And she was kidnapped, raped, and murdered. And this case became very important because it was the first murder conviction in Georgia without the recovery of a body. The man was convicted and later admitted to it, but they never found the body. They found other woman's clothes buried in the backyard of his house. And we're watching this story, and it kind of sounded familiar, but when you've been in law enforcement for many years, a lot of things sound familiar in a blurry way. You know what I'm talking about. And the story goes on and on and on, and then they mention the name, and they're talking about Calvin Butch Hinton. And I'm kind of thinking, this is starting to sound a little bit more. And then they show an old picture of him back from the trial, and I'm like, honey, I know him. I Google on my phone. When you're watching TV, everybody's got a cell phone right next to them. So I started Googling and looking. Let me show you a picture right here of Calvin Butch Hinton III. He was the umpire. He also, at Hays State Prison, my 4 years there, was the orderly that worked up in the medical and in the barbershop. This same man who's killed several women, kidnapped, raped, and murdered, was our orderly. Now, the purpose of this video is to let you know, here's an example of what was around us. Hays State Prison, a level 5, close security, max security prison. We had behavior units. I was a supervisor in the tier 2. And just over 200 beds. We had a tier 1, which was a 30-day in and out isolation kind of thing. So with almost 1,100 inmates, 900 and some are life without parole, murdered, kidnapped. A lot of serial killers there. So here's this guy, I'm just going to call him Butch now. He's in medical. We have inmates, for whatever reason, have to go to medical. He's the one there to clean up. Inmates bleeding, he's the one gets out the bleach, cleans the floors up. He's the one that would come to the chow hall, pick up the tray. How many do you need a medical? We got 14 today. He's the one came picked up the food. When the barber, who also killed his ex-wife, wife, they weren't divorced yet, he caught her cheating. He killed her and the man and set the car on fire with the bodies in the car. He was our inmate barber. Didn't cut my hair, I cut my own. I have unique styles. Sometimes, the mohawk and the extended high and tight, you've seen them on the videos. But he was the barber. So the barber was a murderer. Butch, who worked in the medical, which was right next to the other side of the door for the barbershop, he shined boots. He shined my boots, I don't know, 50 times. The other young guy in there, drug deal went bad, buying a couple pounds of marijuana. He started shooting the house up with marijuana. He was high. Shooting with marijuana, with a shotgun. Shot right through the door, killed somebody on the other side of the wall. All three of these. The fourth guy that came in and out, he had killed multiple people. So we were surrounded by murderers. Back in 2012, and I'm going to have an officer do an interview with me here pretty soon, the next couple weeks, that as he came on shift and came through the front bunker, the only administrative inmate orderly with permission to come up to the front bunker, not in it, but up to it, came up, stabbed the officer. Second officer, the bunker sergeant, jumped on him to protect him. He got stabbed multiple times. The sergeant lived, the officer did not live. My buddy went in, was a part of that attempt to save the officers and subdue and handcuff this orderly in for murder who came up and murdered the officer. Murder's all around you. You need to know this. You're not just walking into a dorm. You know, this is not the post office fraud. They're not stealing mail. It's not just checks. They're not trying these blacktop scams. You work in a prison, you're going to be around the murderers, the rapists, the ones that put babies in a microwave. We had that guy in Georgia. Put the baby in a microwave and exploded the baby. He was not received very well when he got to the GP dorm, I'll put it that way. But here I am around Butch. I remember having conversations. I remember the barber teasing. He's like, well, when I killed, my wife cheated on me, I shot her and him in a car and I set the car on fire. And then he told me that was my mistake, setting the car on fire. Car fire, drew too much smoke, too much attention. He said I should have just drugged the bodies out after I shot them, moved the car somewhere else, and then left their bodies in a ditch or a field somewhere, buried them. Then maybe I wouldn't have got caught. He said, yeah, I was high on meth when I did it. Wasn't thinking clearly, but burning a car sure got me in trouble. And I remember Butch talking about kidnapping with a knife, taking him back to the house, to the basement. And he told me he had multiple females tied up, you know, one at a time. It wasn't a collection there. And you know, this was the house that he was married and his wife lived in, who was upstairs while he was doing this, sneaking this down in the basement. I asked him, I remember asking him, what did you do with the body after you killed her? Can't say. He would not tell me. And I was careful, coming from a law enforcement background. I didn't want to ask him because I was not an investigating officer. You know, I didn't want to push anything. It was just in conversation with three murderers in a barbershop of a prison. Where did you hide the bodies? And, you know, I left it alone. I let the special agent know he had said something, but he wouldn't say anything more and stopped with that. And I know to this date, we watched the TV show last night, February 5th, 2021 on Dateline. The body's not been recovered. He'll never tell. He always put his head down. He kind of cowered away from us. He was scared of us. I first met him, I was on the CERT team. You know, when you got 10 guys come in on the CERT squad all full of energy and equipment, you know, full of muscle, because all we did was work out all the time. It was the guys in great shape. He didn't want to cross us in any way. But he never. He lived in a faith-based dorm, got a lot of privilege, kept quiet, kept to himself, but he would never confess what he did with that body. You know, and it's just ironic, in the same week that Frank posted this, should we know? Yes, you should know. Let me give you another couple quick examples here and I'll end this video. We had two vice lords that in their criminal career had obtained the status of warlord. They could declare war. And I knew both of them. One of them was the head of the inmate kitchen staff. Torres obtained his warlord status by beating his 12-year-old daughter with a baseball bat. Now, if you're the officer working in the kitchen, you're the officer working his dorm down in Y building, it's kind of important to know this inmate sacrificed his 12-year-old daughter beating her with a baseball bat to death to get gang status. That should be a clue in your head. No, you don't trust them. You treat them fair, firm, and consistent. Yes, all three. Put my hand right here. You've taught that. All three, you have to be that way. But for your right, officer safety, you have a right to know that this inmate, if he beat his daughter with a bat to death, he's going to beat you to death with anything he can find. The other warlord was committed many, many murders in El Salvador. And he laughed. He said, I was only convicted of one, and that's what got me here. He'd been waiting extradition. He got cancer. Nobody wanted to move or do anything. He was stage 4. It was determined by powers to be that he would stay in Georgia. The last time I talked to him, we talked about death and about understanding death. He got transferred and died a month later down in Augusta at the medical prison. He was so in tune and adept and familiar with death and his killing and being around killing. He looked at me and he said, I know you were a police officer, I can tell. He said, the way you look and the way you talk and you keep your distance, present yourself unlike all the others around here. And I said, yes, I'm retired police. And his health was getting bad. It wasn't an escort taking him to the shower in the isolation unit. I had to hold his arm and another officer, and we were helping him almost as a physical walker. His health got that bad. And he told me, he said, you've carried a lot of death with you. He said, I don't see that you've been traumatized, but I know you've carried it. He said, the one piece of advice I can give you and those like you that's been around death, as a police officer, you investigate, you get there to the scene, there's a body. He said, and I know what happens because I've killed people and stood over on the side and watched and see what the police did. He said, you get there and you've got protocol, procedure. You have to go do this, notify this, draw a quick sketch, try and take pictures if you can. You go through this process. He said, but you never really stop, take time to pray, ask God to receive this person and for God to give you guidance in this matter. He said, you never stop. You compartmentalize it and you file it back in your head. You store it away. Now, this is information coming from a mass murderer and serial killer, both from what he admitted to me, with MS-13, as a warlord that can declare war. This is what he's telling me how I need to better let things go. And I didn't have any post-traumatic stress from this. But I could tell him in great details information about car wrecks and fires and things, bodies from the river. And he said, you remember it so well. He said, you need to sit down and everything you can remember, write it on a piece of paper. And you're a Christian, just pray about each one of them until you're done. And that way you won't feel like you're carrying any negativity in you. He said, when I killed people, I stopped and I made my peace. I didn't have to investigate anything. I killed them. I went about my day. I did this. Before I went to bed that night, I took time and reflected on this. Whatever my thoughts were, I left it on the table that day. He said, that's why I have no problems. I'm not feeling this. Same exact advice I got from a high-ranking officer at West Point Military Academy at an airport about 2 years ago. Why am I saying all this to you? I'm not the only one that's been around death and going to be around death and violent people. You are. Everybody watching this video is going to be around violence. Everybody watching this video is going to handcuff as a police officer, handcuff as a correction officer, to move, to escort, take to the shower, to do intake with. Maybe the police are dropping them off. A face like this, to you, does it look like a serial killer? Somebody who's going to kidnap, rape, and murder multiple women? And the survivor on the show talked about she felt the cold steel on her neck, and he said, I'll just do it right here, just like the others. I'll off you right now. For somebody that's killed multiple times and talks like that, she didn't know, but she believed her life was in danger. She tried to plan an escape route. She tried, and what ultimately saved her was in the basement, hearing something upstairs. She had got the way through the tape on her mouth and hollered, and Butch's wife came down, and then, like a coward he is, he immediately, oh, honey, this is not what you think. It's not this, it's not that, and he played that role. Anyhow, Every day I worked in a prison, I was around him. I was around 950 other murderers doing life. Keep that in mind. Be safe. Remember, I'm always talking about mind, body, and spirit. Get plenty of rest, eat healthy, exercise, improve your body, your muscle, your conditioning, and improve your heart, your emotion. If you're religious, keep the Bible close, the thoughts of the Bible, the Word of God, keep that close to you. If you're married, you have a significant other, children, family, parents, they're important. You have to go home to them. Think about who you're around. Think about how you're going to safely, reactionary gap 4 to 6 feet, how safely you're going to deal, talk, handle everything involving that inmate throughout your entire shift and go home safely. Hit the like, hit the share. And I wanted to say this in the beginning, thank you again, Frank, for that topic and the idea. And this week has been a great week for me. I've received about 70 new Facebook friends graduating from the Kentucky State Police Class 100, a very milestone and epic class, especially during this time of COVID-19. So to the Kentucky Troopers, Class 100, thank you. Thanks for committing to a career. They're all young baby-faced guys in this class. Thanks again. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Share this with everybody. Be safe.